Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning into tonight's panel discussion. It is being held by the St. Kitts and Nevis Department of Labor, and the topic for this evening surrounds today, World Day of Safety and Health at Work. This is a day that is celebrated annually by members of the International Labour Organization, and because St. Kitts and Nevis is such a member, we celebrate that day as well. The theme for this evening's discussion is the theme for the celebrations this year, which is Anticipate, Prepare, and Respond to the Crisis. Invest now in resilient occupational safety and health systems. So we have a full panel, and I will be your moderator this evening. My name is Jeanne Williams, and I will now take this opportunity to introduce the panelists. On my far right, we have Mr. Andrew Satney. Andrew is currently the Executive Director of the St. Kitts Nevis Chamber of Industry and Commerce. He has a history, extensive history, working with trade policy, as he was an advisor to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis as a consultant in the area of international business and transforming operations generally to improve effectiveness and efficiency in relation to our trade facilitation and matters of that nature. He has conducted several market research exercises at the regional and international levels, worked extensively on private sector development at the regional and international level, including farmers and service providers in product development, product transformation, manufacturing, value-added, export promotion, and marketing. He is the holder of a postgraduate diploma in international trade policy, a Master's of Science degree in international marketing and product management, a bachelor's degree in agricultural economics, and he has also received formal training in project appraisal, implementation, and management at the Caribbean Development Bank, amongst others. So we definitely have someone with quite a wealth of experience here on our panel today. Next to Mr. Satney, we have Mr. Desroy Tate. He is the director and chairman of the manufacturing division of the St. Kitts and Nevis Chamber of Industry and Commerce. He's also a quality assurance manager and HACCP coordinator at Carib Brewery, SKN Limited. He's worked in food safety and quality control for over 10 years. He has a bachelor's of science degree in agriculture and a master's of business administration. He also comes with a wealth of experience and training in general industry and safety and health, and he's a trained internal auditor in that area as well. So we welcome Mr. Desroy Tate. Next to me is Mr. Junique Eddy. He is a labor officer in the Department of Labor. Next to him is Mr. Nourish Nital. He is currently employed within the Ministry of National Security and specifically within the National Drug Council. He currently holds a BA in chemistry, a certificate in mediation of civil matters, a bachelor's degree in law, master's degree in forensic psychology, and he's currently a doctoral student in clinical psychology. So we welcome Mr. Nital to the panel as well. And next to him, we have Mr. Larry Vaughan, who is here representing the St. Kitts Trades and Labor Union. He's the first vice president. So I welcome each of you, gentlemen. Thank you for agreeing to take part in this panel. We look forward to the discussion as we talk about developing resilient occupational safety and health systems. Now, Mr. Eddie, I think I will start off with you. If you could just give us generally some insight into what really concerns occupational safety and health and why this is an important issue for us to be considering at this point.
Okay, well, let me just first say good night to all the listeners, the viewers online, those watching ZIZ home in their homes. Occupational safety and health is it's a very important topic in the world of work. We've seen, as we've seen globally, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has caused some ruckus throughout the whole world. So occupational safety and health plays a critical role in regards to how employees, employers, and generally the world of work, how it operates. So we think that the theme being anticipate, prepare, and respond to the crisis, invest now in resilient OSH systems, it's very pertinent at this time, while we have to now think about how we go forward, how we deal with other pandemics or other issues where the world of work would be impacted. So for me, this is a very crucial time where our federation, as well as the global world, has to now see where we can now put things in place to guide against having the biggest impact or having a better reaction to the pandemic as it would have caused throughout the whole world, basically.
Thank you so much for that. And now that Mr. Eddie has really done a great job at laying the framework, I will now invite each of the panelists to give me 2 minutes opening statement on your perspective. What is your view generally on this theme, and the perspective that you hope to come out from this discussion here this evening. So I'll start with Mr. Statney again.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening, viewers and listeners of ZIZ Television and Radio. I thank the Department of Labor for inviting the St. Kitts Nevis Chamber of Industry and Commerce to be a panelist on this very important day in relation to the world of work, and also this evening as well to be part of the discussion that's taking place with regards to being resilient and being ready for whatever, not only the pandemic, but as we all know, in the Federation, we are exposed to several other natural elements that could impact on the workers and employers in the Federation. In our chamber, the St. Kitts Nevis Chamber of Industry and Commerce, have a membership of just over 130 companies, private sector companies, that are broad-based in what they do. For example, we have representation from the financial sector, persons involved in the cleaning sector, persons involved in import and export, distribution, providers of professional services such as legal, accounting, also finance, and so on. We are also we also have members involved in providing other products and services, whether it be transportation, manufacturing, and manufacturing is quite large, and I'm quite happy tonight we have the chairman of the manufacturing division, Mr. Tate, here with us tonight, so he can speak extensively about what the manufacturing division has done in relation to remaining resilient, whether it be for the pandemic, but for otherwise. With regards to the issue of the theme for tonight, the theme for tonight and for today is not only resilience for now. The word resilience was coined some time ago. I think it became popular after Dominica went through Hurricane Maria and so on. But we think it is a practice that has to be there throughout every operation at all times, because at the end of the day, occupational health and safety is a requirement for everyone in the organization. Sometimes people tend to focus mainly on workers, but we think it's the responsibility of employers, workers, and all workers, because workers have to look out for their colleagues, and ensure that wherever the work is, the work area is safe, and do not allow the colleagues to be prone to any accidents and carelessness and so on. So it is our practice in the private sector to ensure that our workers are as healthy as possible, simply because if we do not have a healthy workforce, we'll not have a productive workforce. So it is our responsibility and our interest to look out for our workers at all times and at all levels. And again, the manufacturing division will tell you exactly how they score themselves in relation to ensuring that they have a healthy workforce. So as the discussion proceeds tonight, we will speak a little more about what we do in the private sector and how we see the importance of the world of work is, and the issue of occupational health and safety, or occupational safety and health, whichever way you want to put it, to productivity of the company's productivity of the nation, and the ability to manage through challenging times. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Satney, for that. And Mr. Tate, on behalf of the manufacturing division, what is your perspective of the theme generally?
Good evening to the moderator and members of the panel that are here with us tonight. A special welcome to viewers home in the Federation and the diaspora, those who are watching direct on the television or streaming via the World Wide Web. I would like to say a special thanks to the Department of Labor for extending an invitation to the manufacturing division to be represented here today as we celebrate World Safety Day. The manufacturing sector continues to be an important part of the St. Kitts Nevis economy. The sector represents approximately 7% of the GDP of the Federation. Over the last 10 years, the manufacturing sector in St. Kitts and Nevis has been the major exporter within the OECS to the United States of America. As a matter of fact, the exports of St. Kitts and Nevis are larger than all the exports of all the other OECS islands combined. The manufacturing division is comprised of 13 members. The companies continue to play a major role in the development of the Federation. The sector is fully committed to the health, safety, and well-being of our members and employees, and for that reason, this year's theme to anticipate, prepare, and respond to crisis, invest now in resilient occupational safety and health system is in keeping with our policies. The health and well-being of our employees is very important to the division, and as such, we have conducted the necessary risk assessment throughout our operations with the objective to mitigate and reduce exposure to risk by the various employees. We have created effective awareness campaigns to educate and inform our employees about the various established health and safety protocols. The manufacturing division had also sought to provide all the necessary personal protective equipment to ensure we safeguard health and well-being. A total of 53 companies were awarded by the Department of Labor in 2019 for an inspection on occupational safety and health. This is an inspection award ceremony that is done every year, but because of the COVID last year, they were unable to do it. Ultimately, we have a responsibility of due care to ensure employees can work in a safe environment and therefore return home without harm and injuries. This year, in celebrating Safety Day, we reminded employees of the importance of our HSE policies and the need to comply. With respect to the pandemic, we had to retool, redesign, and adapt to remain competitive and sustainable. A number of measures we had to implement, ranging from amending the workstations to employment of medical personnel to ensure that we followed the necessary protocols. With that being said, we are fully committed to this year's theme, both from the Chamber of Industry and Commerce and also the Manufacturing Division. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll skip Janique. Mr. Nital, what perspective do you bring to this discussion tonight?
Good evening to viewers and listeners. Special good evening To my daughter out there in the Bronx, Neurisha Nital, who indicated to me that she would be tuned in and she would be listening most attentively. Now, the World Wide Web would have created a position where persons would normally see breaking news, persons experiencing traumatic events, even becoming aware of persons who are suffering based on this pandemic. We have seen people become hopeless. You looked at CNN and you heard a young man asking his dad, "Please do not let me die." But the father could have done nothing to assist. We heard the situation about India, where the country is actually out of oxygen and there is emergency. These events, even though we are not directly in the vicinity, they can be extremely traumatic to us, even from being a distance down here. And it is important that we work on the psychology. We have to work on the psychology. Persons are experiencing trauma. They are learning about the persons who are experiencing trauma. We experience this almost on a daily basis when we look at the numbers on CNN, the number of persons who would have passed away. The vaccine, persons are still skeptical, even though it might be the best thing to do. People are catastrophizing the situation whether or not they should take the vaccine. And we have to become a little bit more resilient. Even though the emphasis is on the physical injury aspect and keeping the workers safe, there is a psychological aspect to it. There's a psychological aspect, and we cannot get away from that. We have to take note that a man is a mind with a body, not a body with a mind. And if you do not safeguard the well-being of a person's mind, the body would not produce what you want them to produce. So we have to look at areas where we can start being proactive. For example, we can look at cognitive processing therapy and start screening our workers. It is an evidence-based sort of intervention. It is a 12-session therapy where you can actually offer these persons resilience, because what people would be experiencing is post-traumatic stress disorder. Long after things would have stopped, you see somebody being taken in the ambulance, maybe on CNN. Locally, you could be here and you see the ambulance passing. It brings back memory of when you saw that person struggling on the ambulance while you look at CNN. So we have to be very, very mindful that we need to put things in place. For the post-traumatic stress disorder, it is proven that the cognitive processing therapy is the most resilient type of therapy that can be given to persons. But post-traumatic stress disorder is not the only thing that persons would be experiencing. You have depression. A lot of people go into depression because the whole landscape with respect to the livelihood and the normal chores that they would do, everything is just seem under the control of something else and somebody else. And it has been proven that cognitive behavioral therapy would be the most resilient type of therapy for depression. So we have two things. We have the cognitive processing therapy that would take care of the post-traumatic stress, which is a 12-session therapy situation, and then for the cognitive behavioral therapy, that is for the depression. And I want to sound a warning to persons, employers, because persons showing up to work, a lot of persons are under stress. A lot of persons are under stress. And I think it is time that we put something in place we call the fit for duty employment. You might have somebody working for you and the holidays might be due in September. But in March, you realize that the person is just not performing. Something is happening to that person. You must subject that person to screening, evaluation, and see if you must not bring those vacations forward to maybe May, so the persons can have intervention. It's not all about people just working. You got to carry out the fit for duty assessment and make sure that the mental health of your workers are kept in check. I will say there for now, and as the discussion goes on, we'll get back to the mental health.
We will definitely get back to that. And good evening to your daughter and everybody else who is watching as well. Mr. Vaughn, rounding out the pack this evening, the perspective of the Trades and Labor Union.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and to the Department of Labor for inviting the Trades and Labor Union to be a part of this discussion. We look at occupational safety and health, and we think that it indicates not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, but like Nital would have just said, that it has this psychosocial and psychological aspects to it, and we believe that the worker must be fit in his mind, and Mr. Nital said it best, for work. And so we are looking at what affects the health of the worker, and it is directly related to his safety and the hygiene at work. And so we are recognizing that the protection of labor and the protection of workers against sickness and disease, and we want to know whether or not it is occupational or it is related to occupational injury. We want to look at it as a fundamental element of social justice, that we want to make sure that when the worker is able to gain an income, he or she is bettering his life or her life. Not being able to work because of injury prevents that worker from having an income. And so we are looking at that most clearly. What we also want to look at is the status quo as it exists in St. Kitts and Nevis today. And while the world looks at the term resilience, can we in St. Kitts and Nevis really use the term resilience when we are talking about our OSH? Are we to return to something that is desirable? Have we attained something that is desirable when it comes to OSH in St. Kitts and Nevis? And after this pandemic, should we go back to that? And we are concerned about that. And so we prefer in the St. Kitts and Nevis reality maybe to speak to growth and sustainability of an OSH program, rather than in 2021 in our reality to speak to resilience, to go back to something when that something may not have been the best for us. And so we are looking at areas of conventions and standards. The ILO would have just about 170 existing standards. St. Kitts and Nevis would only have ratified 10, 8 of which are the fundamental conventions. But have we even ratified the OSH, the Occupational and Safety Convention? So while we are speaking about it, we need to know on behalf of workers that the standards are in the law, because with the 130 companies that are represented to the chamber, the question is, do they have their own standards, or should there be a national standard that could guide the discussion when it comes to the OSH? And so we want to look at that most clearly. We want also to look at those conventions that have been ratified already. How do we as a country live up to those? Because we don't want to go and sign on to new ones, but the ones that should be guiding us, we are woefully falling short. And so we're looking at something like the Freedom of Association and Protection, that convention, number 87. And we look at Article 3.2 of that, where it speaks to public authorities shall refrain from interference with or to restrict the right or impede the lawful right to organization of whether employers or workers. Yet, we have a situation where in St. Kitts and Nevis, it is, for 41 years now, it is illegal for any union in St. Kitts and Nevis to represent workers in a collective bargaining agreement and ask for them to collect, to pay in dues when they are not members of the union. And so that restricts the union from its organizing capabilities. But yet it has been taken out of the law and made illegal since in the very early 1980s. And so how do we make sure, having ratified Convention 87, that we are making sure that we can make sure that the workers are better served as a result of the conventions we sign on? For example, there's discrimination at Convention 111. And in Article 1.1 of that, it defines discrimination as any distinction, exclusion, or preference which has the effect of nullifying or impairing the equality or opportunity and treatment in employment or occupation. Let's just break that down. In a time of a crisis like this, does the distinction between someone who is vaccinated and unvaccinated become now a rift in workers, a separation, act of discrimination when the vaccinated gets to work, but the unvaccinated has to either pay for some tests every 2 weeks? And what do we make sure that there are no penalties that are associated with one group over next? Because this now looks to that psychological aspect of it, where fear comes in and threat is being put forward. And so we have to look at that in the whole context of occupational safety and health. We also want to look at tripartite number 144, where we have an aspect that speaks to representatives of employers and workers, that they should be able to freely choose who they want to represent them on bodies that are tripartite in nature. And we have 3 such bodies that we are aware of. There's a National Tripartite Committee, there's a Social Security Board, and there's a National TVET Council, where employers and workers and the government sit together to make decisions on these. But we have a situation now where the Minister of Social Security is saying to a union that you cannot sit on the board, and he has personally picked someone to sit on that board through another union that doesn't even have members. And this now works to an issue that needs to be developed and discussed. And so we want, just like all the others, to speak to being inclusive and also to speak to being proactive. And once we are able to look at these things, we believe that we can be able to shape a system on OSH that is better for the people and the workers of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Well, I'm already seeing that I don't think we will have enough time to go into all the issues that were raised here this evening, but we will do our best. I actually want to start out with the issue of the psychosocial implications. Mr. Nital, you spoke about, things that we see on CNN and what we see happening in India. But what have you experienced, perhaps in your professional capacity, about what we're experiencing here on that level in St. Kitts and Nevis? And, well, we have quite a number of persons out there who are either close friends or family members. I mean, I call my daughter 3-4 times per day because she's in the Bronx, New York. And you know what's going on in America with respect to this pandemic. You also have the situations where blacks seem to be gunned down on a regular basis by police officers.
And you have to be in continuous suspense as to when would you get that phone call that something would have happened to a close friend or a family member. What you find happening here, though, is persons are turning to drugs and alcohol. And we at the National Drug Council, we have strong concerns about that, because the smoking is being done by persons who are not yet 25. And science would have told us that the brain is not fully developed before the age of 25. So we are confronted with an increased smoking of marijuana, of course, but marijuana is a sort of gateway drug. When you start to get involved in marijuana, the next thing would be something a little more harsh. They're involved in drinking, and then they have this thing they call the formula, a combination of smoke and drink that you find our young fellas, they're not even getting the drive to go and work. Sometimes you talk to them, we're going to die anyhow. They start to catastrophize. We're going to die anyhow. So we don't have to hurt up our heads with that. How do we get under them and try to work along and bring them back more on a positive path? Because the problem with this, if they do not work because of the indulgence in drugs and alcohol, marijuana, smoking, and the consumption of alcohol, we have to understand those who worked long before us. We are making contributions into the Social Security for those persons who would have long worked before us. We are expecting that those who come in after us will make their contributions so that we can get our benefits. And if that doesn't happen, unfortunately, there will be a void. There will be a void. I'm working to make sure that the older ones get their benefits. But who would work for me to ensure that I get my benefit in future years? So we have to get these youngsters, especially those under 25, to come back. Let them know that there is hope. We have to do our testing. We have to, our laws, we don't have any drinking laws. We don't say what age you should start drinking at. You know, we try something with marijuana, but it's just not working. Because even though we tell them not to indulge the school children, we still had the school children being indulged in an exponential way. What can we do to rein back these people? And I'm happy to say at this juncture, I would have made up my mind to do what you call a mixed method study with respect to the use of drugs and alcohol in our secondary schools. I have put the proposal together, and I'll be carrying out that, concertedly carrying out that, because there's a need for that. We cannot afford for that void. We cannot afford for that void. We have parents who work in many jobs in order to get ends meet. Some of them work in shift, a different shift today, a different shift tomorrow. We know from a psychological perspective, the impact on the brain on people who work shift, our frontline workers, our nurses, they work shift. And I think that they need to pay close attention to that. Simply because if you work shift for 2 weeks and then a different shift next week, the body, the circadian rhythm that you're supposed to have, it gets disrupted and your brain is interfered with drastically. I think we have to revisit that practice. Persons should be working shifts for, say, like 6 months. You know, you get a good rhythm. So when you change over for the next 6 months, you have at least a month and a half grace period to catch yourself to go for another 4.5. We got to be very, very mindful of persons who work shift. And these youngsters are putting a lot of stress on their parents who work different jobs, and unfortunately the employers are not compensating these people, taking that into consideration. They just want the physical production. What about the psychological impact it has on persons who have to work shift? Insomnia. They could hardly get sleep. You understand? And at the end of the day, some of them have midlife crisis because there is nothing coming in. You help persons to build empires, and they keep you at the minimum wage. They don't care if it is a livable wage. And all the concessions and the provisions that government would allow in order for them to keep people employed, they don't pass on much to the employees.
Get the perspective of the chamber on that point particular. And I'll ask Mr. Satney, what has been the response of the chamber to the psychosocial effects that COVID-19 has had on the employees? Do you even see that as a responsibility of the chamber to address?
In responding to this question and this debate, I'd like to say one thing. The largest single employer in the Federation is the government. So when we talk about employers in general, it includes the government that employs more than 10,000 people. So that perspective perhaps can come from a representative of the government on the panel. So I say that to say that sometimes people speak, and when they say employers, they only think of the private sector. We have to put everybody together. Now, with regards to the issue of the situation that has changed since last year, March, with regards to COVID-19 and so on, a lot of employers made several changes to accommodate the working people, the workers, to ensure business continuity, to ensure people remain employed, wages are earned, and so on, and for, of course, to help with the people to provide for their families and friends and loved ones. So we see, for example, adjustments were made in the workplaces, in the factories in the Federation, as it relates to the number of persons that can be accommodated in the workplace, bearing in mind the need to comply with the protocols that are given by the Task Force on Government with regards to social distancing, physical distancing, hand sanitizing, everything that comes with it, which I know all employers and all employees know what it is right now, how to operate in the workplace. In some situations, arrangements were made for workers to work from home. We saw, for example, that companies invested in the necessary technology to ensure, again, that the employees remained at home and so forth, but still continue to work using the technology. Adjustments were also made with regards to the hours of work and number of persons that come to the workplace and what days of the week they operate in. It has worked to some extent depending on what area of employment the persons are. If they are in a situation where they work, for example, in the hospitality tourism sector, where you have the need for more bodies to get the work done, it is more challenging and has been very challenging for that sector in itself. We have seen, for example, as the economy slowly turns around, and of course, let me just say from the onset, I commend the work done by the COVID-19 Task Force and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis to really managing the situation, that they have done such a fantastic job that is why we are not in the situation as some of the other islands close to us with regards to the continued curfew and lockdown that's taking place in some of them. But we see here, for example, in construction, we can still continue the various projects in the Federation. Our factories have increased the number of persons that come to work. And at the same time, within the government employment, all the government offices are operating and functional and so on. The large businesses continue to operate and so forth. So in effect, adjustments have been made with regards to the ability of people to work with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. And adjustments will continue to be made, and we see the adjustments being made with regards to the education of workers on what is required of them in that regard. We know that is what's taking place within the private sector, but I'm not too sure about the government sector in that regard. Thanks.
Okay, I still want to find out specifically about has there been any specific consideration for mental health? Are these things being done to ensure that employees are operating in the best mental health, or were they done for other reasons? Do you believe that there can be more done for mental health of employees in this pandemic?
That's why I talk about that.
We have the employers, and then we have the employees on one side. I hope that wasn't intentional.
I have no idea, but, but I think, when you talk about this aspect of employment in the private sector, we tend to operate in that manner.
Well, with respect to the question about mental health and the pandemic, we basically did an assessment within the division where we looked on the staff members that we have to determine who we really need on site to continue work. So persons over 60, for example, we allowed, who were able to work from home, we allowed them to work from home, specifically within the manufacturing sector. Persons with underlying symptoms, such as the asthmatics and so forth, we allow them to be home for the period of time while we continue to pay them. We also made some amendments to like the workstations and so forth, and we reviewed the work hours, as Mr. Satney indicated earlier, to ensure that we were able to continue with the operation and to keep persons employed. A number of manufacturing plants here, we also employed health personnel to come on site to conduct tests and checks and so forth to make sure that the persons, they were in fact fit and were able to work. So yes, some efforts and were made in that regards to ensure that we took everything into consideration as far as the well-being or the health and the health of the workers were concerned.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Eddy, I would ask you, from the Department of Labor, can you endorse what Mr. Nital has said in terms of the experiences of kitchens and divisions working, in terms of what have you seen in your department from people in depression, the drinking? I don't know if you have a different experience from the perspective of the Department of Labor, but is this an issue that we really have to address?
Of course, Jen, we would see these coming out. We do inspections of the workplaces, and during these inspections, this is where these things would come to light. We would see employees complaining about certain things, and we would see also employers complaining about the same things, just on a different side of the bat, basically. So we try to use these inspections to give a better guiding light as to how we can then push forward a case to the government, which would be us, and then the powers that be, to enforce some laws, some legislations, which would give us a better feeling ground as to make sure that everyone at the table is better fed, because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of cases. It's a case where you would have to use what you see here, use what you see there, and then try to combine them to see how much we can then better suit everyone. Because as you said, it's not where one company can just do this, and then this would then put everything to bed. Another company is facing a different but slightly compatible situation. And then, as you said, during these inspections, which Mr. Tate would have alluded to, we would have awarded or rewarded some companies last year, 2019 as well, for being compliant. Now, being compliant in this case just means that once the Department of Labor would have come around and do inspections, asking the employer, and employees alike, to work hand in hand to provide a safe system of work. This is where we would then ask the employers to just provide that framework where employees can come, be safe on the job. If there are hazards that would be present, we ask them to try to mitigate them so as to make sure that the employee can come to work and not have an excuse not to perform, not have an excuse to not be productive. Because at the end of the day, we have to be productive. In the world of work, we cannot drop the ball, because an employer is looking at you as a target. They are looking at you as, if you're not performing, I have to get somebody who is performing, because the job has to be done. So it's not that I'm trying to be a friend to you. We want the job to be done. So if you are not doing the job, what can we do as a government? What can we do as an authority to ensure that you would be providing the necessary frameworks to ensure that the employee is comfortable enough to do the job, and then the employee now can then look to his boss, look to his employer and say, are you providing the necessary tools for me to be productive, for me to be efficient? on the job. So of course the psychosocial aspect of it is very, very important. And as we said, we see it daily. We at the department, we would have cases where persons would come to the department and say, you know, working from home is very tedious from them, but can we do any better right now? Can we force the employer to gainfully have you employed on site now, using the COVID protocol, using the necessary social distancing aspects of it? So we would have to work hand in hand, as we said, to ensure that both parties, the employers and the employees, can find that leveling ground where both can say that, you know, we have enough to provide this relationship and go forward with this relationship. Okay.
So we need to find that balance. Definitely, we need to find that balance. I wonder, Mr. Vaughan, from the employee's standpoint, do you believe there's room for improvement? There's we've heard that there are measures and initiatives that have taken place in different companies and places of employment. But Mr. Nittal spoke very eloquently about the issues that are being experienced. Are these, from the employee standpoint, are these initiatives helping, or can more be done?
The initiatives of businesses would be commendable. However, they need to be based on standards, best practices that can be replicated across industries. For example, when I listen to Mr. Tate, he's speaking about a manufacturing sector. However, he would not be speaking to the services sector. What happens in the services sector? When Mr. Satney would speak of the government as an employer, we must always understand that government comes in wearing two hats. Government is regulator and employer at the same time. Who regulates the government? And it is when the government puts standards in place that employers, through the ILO, could monitor and say, these standards are being met, and the workers, through their representatives, can monitor and say, these are being met. When they are left to the companies to deal with, you are dealing with the largesse, the good nature, the goodwill of the employer to do something. And if he chooses not to, who can make him? Because there are no standards codified in law that would help to shape the system. And so when I hear about arrangements for social distancing and adjustments for education and teleworking, I'm saying there are standards at the ILO for these. Let us bring them into focus, shape them into our legislative system, and let us try to build a labor market that abides by the standards. Not that John can do something and let us applaud Jane for doing something when they are different. And so workers are getting bad treatment over there, but you can't do anything about that because there's nothing that stops that. And they're getting some good treatment over here, and it may not be the best treatment, but we will applaud it as good because there's nothing against which to base it as a standard. And so these are the things that we must look at. And I want to close this the question you asked by piggybacking on what Mr. Satney said when he applauded the COVID team. Because we're in a crisis, and the union will not look away from there being a crisis. However, the union continues to wonder, why is it the COVID team has never called workers' representatives, whether of the teachers' union, the trades and labor union, the Nevis teachers' union, to meetings to discuss workers' perspectives? So we always get an understanding what the government wants as a regulator, what the government will do as an employer, what other employers want, but the workers. And that is where what is missing in this crisis, and that is why we cannot jump on the bandwagon of resilience, because we can't go back to something that the status quo will not assist workers.
I see. Well, that is definitely a point that I hope the Department of Labor is taking on. This entire discussion here this evening is really informing their work and what they will be doing to help the government build that resilience. But now we see there may even be a scope for a larger discussion about growth and sustainability, because resilience really means recovering from a crisis. So it means that you're going back to where you came from. But do we want to go back there? Is there scope for us to even go further than where we were before COVID-19? So, Mr. Nital, we'll close off this part of the discussion about the psychosocial implications. You mentioned about the cognitive behavioral therapy and these treatments that are these things being offered by your department? Is it?
But we are saying that employers should come on board, be proactive, and provide that is a way of building resilience for the workers. They have to, because what we realize, if you look at it, simple, the home environment has now been transformed in some cases to the work environment. So that is psychologically impacting on persons who are working from home. Because you get up at morning and you don't know whether to say that you're home or you're at work. And yes, we have to provide people with some degree of counseling or make adjustments so that they can feel that differentiation at some time. Because some people have to clock in. And the employers keep a tab on them. You see somebody in town after 11, you're watching them a sort of way. But you should be home working, but not knowing that the person might be taking an early lunch because they'll work into the evening. And we're not appreciating that. And I think that there's a need, the urgency of now, for persons to provide some adjustments to keep that differentiation alive between work environment and home. A man home is his castle. And when that is taken from the equation, it would be impacting psychologically.
I see. So I think the Department of Labor perhaps could make that linkage between the Drug Prevention Council and the chamber and the other representatives of employers, and of course the employees as well, and those who represent employees. We've done quite a lot of work and we've had quite a bit of conversation about mental health, because these are real issues that are affecting our people, and we can no longer push these issues under the rug. Because as I think someone mentioned earlier about the strength of our industries really relies on our people. So we have to take care of our people, the minds and the bodies of our people. I want to, at this point out to the listeners that if you want to call in and add, oh, sorry, I missed that part. So we're going to take a break and come right back and go into another part of the discussion about occupational safety and health in the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll be right back. And we're back, and thank you for staying with us as we discuss the theme tonight: anticipate, prepare, and respond to the crisis. Invest now in resilient occupational safety and health systems. This is a panel discussion organized by the Department of Labor. And already this evening we have had rich discussion about, the responsibilities of employers and employees and the state of employees and our companies in light of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Gentlemen, we're going to shift our conversation and talk about the big V word that has been circulating quite a lot as we speak about the COVID-19 and the vaccine. Quite a lot of discussion in media, and we would love to hear your perspectives on that. We would also love to hear the perspectives of the public. And so we give you the opportunity to call in and share your views. If you have questions for any of the panelists or comments that you want noted, I want to emphasize that the Department of Labor is listening, and they have organized this panel discussion this evening to get the views of the different representatives that are here tonight, and also to give you another opportunity to air your views so that they can be taken into consideration. If you want to call in, the numbers are 466-2666, 662-8674, 767-4765, and the international number is 1-239-645-4500. 466-2666. I hope we won't have to repeat that anymore because we'll be getting all of the calls back to back. But so we'll shift the discussion now to the COVID-19 vaccination program. As of today, over 12,000 persons have been vaccinated in St. Kitts and Nevis, representing 37.6% of the goal of herd immunity. We have seen some people being very hesitant about taking the vaccine. We have seen some people very eager to take the vaccine and encouraging others to take the vaccine. We have seen measures from employers encouraging or prodding employees to take the vaccine, or there will be some sort of implication to their work status or their ability to be gainfully employed. I would like to hear from, I don't want to start with the Chamber of Industry again. We'll switch it up this time. Mr. Vaughn, from the employees, no, I won't go to Mr. Vaughn as yet. I'll go to my good friend, Mr. Eddie here, from the Department of Labor. As it relates to the vaccine, is there a position from the Department of Labor as it relates to employers forcing persons to take the vaccine? Does the department have a position on that issue?
Well, Gian, simply put, no. The position is that we have to abide by the laws of the land. There is no law that states that it's mandatory for employers to enforce the vaccine upon their workers. So simply put, we cannot have employers enforcing it. So we won't support anybody who makes it mandatory without the proper the necessary guidelines and legislations. We support that. We do, however, encourage all to have that conversation to understand what is being done, what is the need, there's necessity to have the vaccine being put into your bodies. What good would it do for you? What good would it do for your co-workers, the company that you represent? So in the end, we are looking at persons having that dialogue with their employers and employees to understand that it might not just be a simple answer. I mean, Mr. Nitta would have alluded to it. Persons are still very skeptical. So we don't want persons doing it not knowing what they are doing, and then we don't want persons refraining from it because they see it as a scheme, because they see it as, we're just following other countries, because that's the idea that we are seeing from persons who don't want to take it. They feel like it's being done out there, so why is it being done? Why is it being pushed upon us here? Do we understand what is the idea of the vaccine? Do we understand what's the pros and the cons? So I think in the general sense of it, we are just asking for persons to have that information. And I commend the government for putting on seminars, putting on training sessions at the different health centers, which would just help to advocate persons getting more knowledge, because you cannot go wrong by getting more knowledge. The more knowledge you get, the more information you have on a certain topic, you would then be able to make a better informed decision. Now, Mr. Tate, on my right, might say he doesn't want to take it, but does that make Mr. Tate wrong? Mr. Nittal might take it. Does that make Mr. Nittal right? So we are looking at persons' understanding for their personal aspect as well as their colleagues. And that's why we talk about herd immunity. Herd immunity is looking at the general, how much persons in general would be taking it. So the idea of it from our aspect would just be for persons to be informed, and then they would have to make their own decisions. For now, it is not mandatory for anyone to take the vaccine, although there has been encouragement from different aspects of the society. We still encourage persons to listen. We still encourage persons to find out more. Talk to your medical practitioners. Talk to anybody who would give you some advice regarding your health and your safety, because without your health, without your safety, you cannot provide for your family. You cannot provide in the world of work. So at the end of the day, it would all come back down to what you see as the best decision for you. You know, we might be thinking about country, but can I take it without feeling like I'm going to have adverse effects? Is Mr. Nittal's body the same as mine? Can he take something that I can take without both of us having, opposite effects? So as I said, the whole idea would be for persons to be informed, keep learning, keep asking questions. There is no problem with asking questions. Ask your physicians, your medical practitioners, to see where and where they would lead you in terms of the advice, which would be better for you in terms of making that decision.
Okay. But that's the position of the Department of Labor. Now, Mr. Vaughn, from the employee's perspective, as we have seen, there have been a number of letters or material in the media where persons have been told that they have to take the vaccine or they will have to be subjected to interval testing or other consequences. Now, has the Trades and Labor Union done any work in relation to addressing the needs of or the concerns of employees? Are employees concerned about vaccines perhaps becoming mandatory? Or do you already think that they're mandatory because of the effect of the instructions that have been given?
Thanks for the question. I'll go back to the 8th of March. On March 8th, we received our first 3 complaints as a union. And on 9th March, the very next day, the St. Kitts Nevis Trades and Labor Union put out a release. And the synopsis of the release is, we wholeheartedly support vaccination as a means towards reaching maximum immunization. The union does not like the term herd immunity. It seems to reflect too much herd mentality, and we are being pushed into reaching a target. We believe that the better couched of a term is maximum immunization, that having reached this plateau, we are able to reopen the economy and do more because we have reached a point of maximum immunization. I have with me two of the most recent missives by businesses. And unfortunately, they are both authorities of the government. So here, the government is a regulator, but it's an employer. And in one area, and I'm reading it, that the unvaccinated staff, we are requesting the presence of your unvaccinated staff to this mandatory session. And they are calling them there. If the language says you have to, people are going to come with reservations already on their mind. And I like what Mr. Nittel said in his introduction, that we are minds with bodies and not bodies with minds. And it appears the mandatory approach to vaccination is, let us make sure the bodies are already willing to care about the minds. And so there is a concern, and especially where the second says to their workers, go to your doctor and let your doctor then send a message to our doctor to tell us if you could take the vaccine or not. Well, the last time I checked, that medical records are between doctor and patient. So how are you going to ask workers to have their doctors share their medical information with your doctor? What standards do we have in place to protect their medical information once they have now voluntarily gone beyond the statute and the understanding that there is doctor-patient confidentiality? We have none. And so we are asking to move the boundaries without any form of standards to make sure that we are kept within boundaries. And so we continue within this COVID to be reactive, to go down rabbit holes that end up keeping the worker very concerned. What is it that I'm really being asked to do? Where is it that I'm being asked to go with this thing? Because there's one question workers ask, and I myself can't answer. What are the long-term effects of the vaccination? Not that it protects me now and it helps to open the economy, but what are the consequences I can face 3, 4, 5 years down the road? No one knows. And if I can't answer that question for you, how can I dictate for you that you must take it? This is a concern that workers have.
I don't believe any of us can answer that question.
Then none of us should mandate.
That question in particular, but in terms of understanding the need for us to have, you don't want to call it herd immunity, you prefer maximum immunization. Understanding the need for us to reopen the economy, for us to put people back to work.
Good.
How then do we balance?
We balance it through social dialogue, because we have long believed in social dialogue. We have established the Acts for Social Security for the National Tripartite Committee under the Protection of Employment Act and also the TVET Council. We have done all that to help to shape national policy. And it is quite unfortunate that the National Tripartite Committee, which is mandated under the law to advise the Ministry of Labor and the Minister of Labor, and to advise and to put forward recommendations, has never met to put together a response to the vaccination that could shape a policy that meets all the concerns of all the actors in this matter. The first you would hear is that a mention was made that I am calling on all employers to make their workers take the vaccine. That is a concern. We must come to the table and we must discuss it. Because I have long believed that if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. And so if the worker is not brought, his representation is not brought to the table to discuss the matter, then the first person who is on the menu is the worker. Because the policy is now directed towards him rather than coming with his involvement.
I understand your point, but can social dialogue really work if there is still that outlying question about the long-term effects of the vaccine?
Right. So then you would have to shape a policy with alternatives. You would have to shape a policy that still remembers that social distancing is still effective, that hand sanitization and masks are still effective, that we can have different mechanisms in place because we are not fully in the light as to what this epidemic brings to us or this pandemic brings to us. And so we cannot walk down the road of a single bullet in our gun thinking that the vaccine does it all, because we are hearing that we want to protect those who are vaccinated from those who are not vaccinated. And it is quite strange because one would expect that if one is vaccinated, one has been given some form of protection. So how is it that we are looking to protect the protected from the unprotected? Okay, so that is not clear. So what do we do then? If the protected need protection, it means there still need to be other mechanisms that would need to be presented for the proper management of the response to the COVID until there are clearer answers. When I get the vaccination, can I still transmit it? Can I still come down with the illness? One is hearing that the answer to these is yes. One heard that a fully vaccinated person from the United States spending 14 days in quarantine tested positive. Then how do you protect him from the unvaccinated?
Certainly, we see the considerations from the employees. What about the perspective of the employers? What considerations do you have to bear in mind when considering asking employees to take the vaccine? Whether mandating it, whether encouraging it, whether incentivizing it, what considerations do you have to make?
The presentation by the Department of Labor was quite instructive on how the approach is being taken. And we fully agree with what he's saying. The need to seek and get more information for yourself, to educate yourself, because I'm not a health authority, and we are guided by the health authorities, what they say. And what the private sector, the employers do is encourage employees to get as much information as possible. And of course, it relates to can you take it? If you take it, all the questions, there's a lot of information out there. What some employers do as well is invite the health authorities to come into the workplace and have one-on-one with the workers about it. Because some people will say, well, when we do not have time to listen to it on the radio, when the CMO is speaking, so they send out, the Ministry of Health and so on has sent out people to different workplaces to dialogue. And sometimes after the dialogue, some people may decide, okay, I'll take it, I have more information. Some people will say, well, I'm still not taking the information. And that is how we encourage workers to take it, but we encourage them to get as much information themselves as possible. There's a lot of information out there. And that is why, apart from what's on social media and so on, the encouragement is there to invite the physical health authorities to have the one-on-one with them.
Okay. I just want to mention, 2 weeks ago, actually, the World Health Organization published a policy brief on mandatory vaccination, and it gave 6 considerations that countries should be making in determining whether or not mandatory vaccination should be implemented. And I'll just read some of the considerations. For example, the first one is necessity and proportionality. Is it necessary to mandate the vaccine? Will our measures be proportional? So will we have to continue insisting that people are mandated to take the vaccine if there is a mandate? When will it stop? Other considerations noted in the policy brief: is there sufficient evidence of vaccine safety? Is there sufficient evidence of vaccine efficacy and effectiveness? Is there sufficient supply? Is there public trust? And are there ethical processes in the decision making relating to a mandate for vaccination? So before we even get to that stage, the World Health Organization has already laid out these principles and considerations that should be taken into account if we go towards mandating the vaccine. Mr. Nittal, I don't know if you have any particular views on this issue as it relates to mandating that persons get vaccinated.
I want to get the Labor Department back on the table along with the employers. Now let us look at a hypothetical situation. You have 200 persons working at a particular manufacturing site, and 50 of them would have gone to their doctors to indicate that they cannot take the vaccine. You have amongst those workers persons who do not show any symptoms. Now, if one of those 50 persons who cannot take the vaccine come to you, your department, and say, look, there is an occupational hazard at my workplace because nobody has taken the vaccine, the place is not retrofitted to allow for proper, efficient displacement of the air, and the protective ways, you can't keep them on all day. Those without the symptoms, they still have the virus. I couldn't take the vaccine. Suppose somebody transferred that virus to me after my doctor would have told me that I cannot take the vaccine. What would be the position of the Labor Department? Can you come to that workplace and demand that the employers ensure that the other 150 persons take the vaccine in order not to put the lives of the 50 who cannot take the vaccine at risk? What would be the position on that? Would there be legal liabilities if I'm in that 50 and for some reason the employer did not make sure people took the vaccine and didn't carry a high concentration of the virus within their nostrils? What would be the legal implication? What would you say to those 50 employees? Would you tell the employer, would he be tempted to just dismiss them because it is a bit of a liability risk? What would be the response of the Labor Department?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Nittal.
But you understand the scenario?
Of course. Okay. But I think we have to go back to the point that it's not mandatory at this point. So along with consultations and dialogue with the ILO, in terms of the overall aspect of the vaccine and how mandatory it is, that dialogue would still have to be going on with both the employer and the employee. For example, you raised the point about the 250 being vaccinated and the other 150 50 cannot be vaccinated. hoping that would be based on the doctors, the medical
Of course,
practitioners.
but it's still a part of the working environment.
So we would hope that in a case like that, the employer let us know how comfortable they feel about the situation so that they can get us involved, get us to say, you know, can we sit at a table and then discuss this? Because as we say, there might not be just one answer that fits everyone. Because when we say, we send home, let's say we say, okay, let's dismiss those who are not vaccinated.
The 50 of them who could not be vaccinated.
Exactly. Does the law support that? The law doesn't support that. Exactly. So we cannot look at it at a single answer perspective. You raise it in a sense where it is looking at something that may be foreseeable but not unforeseeable in certain cases, because as we say, we are still at a point where the vaccine is not mandatory. So we are hoping that the necessary authorities can give us some more information,
but
can shed some more light.
We came to the department for rescue. What would you do? There's a hazard at the work environment. There's a hazard.
It is.
So what would you say to the employer?
Well, it has to be a situation that we deal with and it happens.
I would like to know what the employers would do.
There is no law. As we said, we cannot point to a specific law to say, okay, this is how we deal with this.
But it's a realistic situation.
Exactly.
That's reality.
Exactly.
There.
So in the absence
of law, we have to
in
look
the absence
then as
of
best
standards
practices,
and
legislation,
law, then you see, I believe COVID has been giving us opportunities to get our house
That's
in
right.
order.
Yes, exactly.
So we still have time. Well, we don't know how much time we have, but it really is an urging for us to do as much as possible to ensure that we are taking the occupational safety and health of our workers seriously. I'm very heartened by the participation here this evening. I am sure this discussion could go on for at least 4 more hours. But unfortunately, we've only been allotted a certain amount of time, which comes to an end in the next 4 minutes. So that having been said, I will give everyone a 30-second opportunity to wrap up. Perhaps make an appeal where you want to make appeals. And just give persons the opportunity, give you the opportunity to say any final words. I'll start with Mr. Vaughn this time.
All right, thank you very much. I want to start off by wishing everyone a happy Labor Day on Monday when it comes. Monday coming is Labor Day, and the St. Kitts Nevis Trades and Labor Union continues to be one of the organizations that champion Labor Day activities, and we want people to celebrate their Labor Day despite the COVID situation. Even in your low-key events, remember the significance that you hold as a worker. And so we want to wish everyone, the panel, a happy Labor Day. And as well, we want to encourage everyone, every worker, to go out and join a union. We're not saying to join the St. Kitts Nevis Trades and Labor Union only, but we're saying join a union. And if you see no union at present that can serve your interests, we are committed as the St. Kitts Nevis Trades and Labor Union to help other unions to establish themselves, because we want all workers to be represented and covered. And so that is where we will end this when it comes to workers' understanding on OSH. So again, happy Labor Day when it comes.
I've always liked to the playing of an orchestra, where the voice who was tuning up comes first, followed by the sweetly blended harmonious music. I'm asking people to trust the science, have faith, and give the science a chance. Okay, to be on the safe side, trust the science. We have trusted the science in many other ways. Let us trust that science and have faith and allow our country to redeem itself and things to take off once more and have a vibrant economy. We need that buoyancy. And I'm appealing to everybody to trust the science, have faith, and give the vaccine a chance.
Thank you so much, Mr. I'll skip over Mr. Eddie for now, and we'll go to Mr. Tate.
Yeah, thank you again for inviting the division to be here today to on this special day. We would recognize the health and safety of the workers here, worldwide and specifically here in the Federation. I would just like to add my voice to the overall vaccination campaign by encouraging both employees and managers, supervisors, whoever working here in St. Kitts and Nevis that to trust the science, as Mr. Nittal mentioned. We have enough evidence, enough information is there. You look on your television these days, you go on the internet, we have enough information about the vaccines in terms of how effective they are. And we would really like to return to some level of normalcy here in St. Kitts, both within the workplace and, in our personal lives. And again, I want to thank you for the opportunity.
All right, Mr. Satney.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Thank you to the organizers of this panel discussion tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to represent the private sector, Chamber of Commerce and employers. I'll just say occupational health and safety is the responsibility of everyone, employees and employers. And in that regard, a safe and healthy workforce and a community will help with the economic recovery of the Federation. We cannot do that. We're all in this together. I too add to my voice and say we need to trust the science. The science has given us a lot of information about the vaccine, the recovery, and everything else. There is no shortage of information. And last night I watched a program on television where the CMO and Dr. Cameron gave an extensive amount of information about what's going on with regards to vaccination and so on and so forth. We encourage everyone to seek more information if they do not have enough dialogue between employer and employees. The employers are all prepared to bring in the health authorities to speak with everyone to get their perspective as well, and let it not be said it's only the employees talking. So I thank you again, and I wish everyone well.
All right, Mr. Eddie.
Yes, I would like to start by thanking all the panelists for joining us tonight on this panel discussion. It has been very informative. I'm hoping that the viewers and the listeners would have enjoyed this session. We would like to say that investing in OSH systems will aid governments, employers and workers in responding to the current pandemic, safeguarding health in the workplace, and recovering faster by avoiding further contagion. By building up these resilient systems, it will also provide a foundation to respond to unforeseen events and crises that may occur in the future. We at the Department of Labor encourage all to keep informed and abreast of all the necessary updates and upgrades in all that is being provided in regards to keeping us safe. As we celebrate the World Day for Safety and Health today, it is celebrated annually, the 28th day of April. So we would like to just, thank all of the workers, all of those in the world of work who would have contributed over the years, all those who would have lost their lives, the families of those persons. We know we use this day to commemorate them, and going forward we would just like to have the dialogue open with all the necessary partners, the chamber, the manufacturing sector, the drug council ministry, and also the trades and labor union, so that we can provide that framework going forward, and then encourage all the powers that be to provide us now with the necessary legislative framework that would then keep everyone in the Federation safe. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you to all of the panelists, and I personally want to thank the Department of Labor for the invitation for me to moderate this session here this evening. I was a bit concerned because I know this is a very heated topic, so I want to commend all of you on your professionalism and the intelligence and poise at which you delivered yourselves this evening. You've done your organizations very, very well. We have to take care of each other. We have to take care of ourselves. And I just wish that all of us who are involved in developing policy and initiatives geared towards bettering ourselves are listening and taking all of the considerations to heart. this discussion, I think we've heard very important themes come out about the importance of standards, the importance of mental health, the role of the government, the dual role of the government, not just as a regulator but an employer itself. What are the civil servants feeling about the mandatory vaccination if something comes into place? So we really need to listen, and I really want to thank the Chamber and Mr. Tate. You guys represented your divisions quite well, and I believe that your members would be happy with your representations here this evening. So thank you to ZIZ and the staff here for having us and facilitating us, and we hope that this is only a continuation of a conversation that really needs to bear some fruit, where both employers and employees can find a comfortable middle ground at the very least. And with that, folks, I will wish you the balance of a good night, hopefully, and wish all of our panelists safe journeys back home. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good night.